it's 500 years of colonialism.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I have to say women are the worst drivers on the roads that I've experienced. Seen them
Way,
all
way
of that.
high up on the
So-
lack of women's safety index in the world.
where?
Hi, I'm Dalai.
Hi, I'm Deepthi.
This is my mom,
This is my daughter,
and this is the Copacetic podcast,
the Copacetic podcast.
where we talk about
Real
stuff.
talk.
Oh, real talk.
What did you say?
Real stuff. That's the intro. I like that. Hi, welcome back.
Welcome back.
Do you consider yourself a feminist?
Not the way it's being defined now, not the way it's being exemplified now, not the way it's being enacted now.
But there have been, as far as I can tell from my research and my experience, debatably 3 or 4 waves of feminism. So would you say that there was a certain wave during which you did identify with it?
Only because of a lack of knowledge and a lack of
Okay.
understanding of what was happening.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say, I've for the better part of my life thought of myself as a feminist.
Yeah.
Until I came to understand, look deeper into it, really assess what that means and how it plays out with who I am and how I operate in life and what it's actually done to women. I would say I'm much more of a womanist now than I am a feminist. If we must put an ism and an ist into, defining who we are, which I don't tend to not.
It's interesting you said womanist, because I've only recently in my life come across that term, and I found that ideology through looking up the Black Panthers and their approach to everything.
Correct.
And how womanism was what came up in
Correct.
them as a response to the women in their organization wanting equality, but there being a fundamental disagreement about feminism because they felt that it only represented the privileged and the white and a certain
The ruling class.
So they were like, we can't label ourselves feminists because that goes against all of our political ideals and all of our social ideals. So what is our response to that? I mean, yeah, I know you've been a feminist because you raised me like that, like without ever saying, oh, I'm raising you a feminist. I do feel like growing up I always felt like that there was no question about it. Like in conversation with friends and thinking about it, if it was ever brought up, it was very clearly like that was you were, by virtue of being a woman in the years that you were alive, you just were a feminist. And it was only through, I guess, history class and like learning on your own and researching the origins of it that I began to question what the purpose of it was as an ideology, with its origins kind of being cited back to the first wave of it being suffrage. And people always talk about that being this amazing movement that was pushing for the rights of women to participate in politics and all. And you're like, was it pushing for the rights of women to participate in politics, or was it pushing for the rights of white
Certain
ladies?
So it's interesting what you just said, that without it ever being said or without it being defined for you, you were just raised to then later in life find out, oh, I was raised as a feminist. So that kind of sums it up for me. Is feminism is a kind of appropriation and co-optation of many populations around the world, primarily indigenous, who just are the way they are, and feminism kind of wants to herd it under its own umbrella. My mother is Nepali, so I come from a lineage of matriarchy.
I love that you're like, my mother's Nepali. Like, I don't know.
Well, because we're here, right? What am I supposed to, like? I know you know,
I'm just
but
playing.
So the whole culture and what's been handed down to me from my grandmothers and even my Punjabi side, it's never said, oh, women are equal and we want this, that, and the other. It was, we just got on with being who we are, sovereign, natural, taking care of what we needed to take care of. The men in the family take care of what they need to take care of. There was never any kind of like again, it's modernity, right? It's modernity that brought all of this together
Some people
to
would argue that your experience in
is
your family
exceptional.
is no, not except, I mean, yes, exceptional, but some people would argue that that experience and the life that you've lived and your experience of what it is to be a woman in the world is due to and by virtue of the fights fought by feminist movements
I
prior
don't
to this
I don't know
moment.
about that. I don't know about that because my father, with whom I grew up with my father, I was raised by a single father, as you know, but again, to give it a context here, who was very orthodox Punjabi, naval officer, and then executive in corporations for the rest of his career after he came out of the Navy. Uh, Orthodox, I keep repeating that because, yes, he was very orthodox in his living and belief and systems. And yet here I am. He sent me to college, got me my first car, got me out into my own first apartment, jobs, the whole shebang.
Yeah,
There was never anything between me and my brother that was
different.
different.
But
Raised
then,
by, and I was raised by a single dad.
yeah,
So, of all things that would render me in a certain way, and like I said, for the better part of my life, I would have said that I am a feminist had someone asked me. It was never asked because it was so prevalent, especially in the States where I came of age, where it never came up for question. But Nepali women, Punjabi women, we just get on with doing our things. And if you look at Punjabi women as a culture, ain't nobody about to mess with a Punjabi woman. You know what I mean? Nobody messes with like proper hatta katta Punjabi women. You can't mess with us, and nor Nepalis. Nepali women are like some tough,
they're hardcore, let me
yeah,
tell you.
yeah,
I know my nani.
matriarchal society, right?
But so you're saying that, your nana, my nana, your dad, there was never any difference between you and your brother in your access to education, in your being empowered to, have a
Yeah,
vehicle, drive around, do whatever
yeah,
you want. But
yeah.
again, a lot of people, I think, would argue that, I mean, you could go to college because there was a certain movement that said, women have a right to education. You
Mm.
could drive a car and have a job because there was a certain movement that said, hey, women can be in the workforce. I mean, I believe that that was a big shift during wartime where they were like, women can wear pants and go into the factories because
I
there are
mean,
no men.
again, speaking from immediate experience, both sides of my family, my mommies, my masis, my buas, my cousin sisters, my grandmothers, all were educated. And we're not some sort of, we don't come from that necessarily elite level who only had access to the education,
You're not
etc., etc.
half-falutin.
Huh?
You're not half-falutin people.
Yeah. But
Just,
yeah, I didn't quite understand, but I get what you're saying now.
it's like a southern,
Faluting, yeah, yeah,
half-falutin.
I get it, I get it. So I don't know if that, even if that holds true. I'm not sure if that holds true. And before education, going to school, getting indoctrinated into the system, which is what I think of the majority of schooling systems
Education
now.
is a business, yeah.
Yeah, before that became something that anybody aspired to. I mean, if you look at the First Nations peoples of any place on the planet, I don't know, like, women had way more going on before the feminism issue came into the picture. There are vast swaths of societies and cultures all around the world that were matriarchal. Most of the planet was matriarchal.
It's this thing of how there wasn't really a question of equality because everybody was just embodying what they needed to embody
Yeah,
within the system of
correct.
the collective to,
To make
for the
things
best and
work,
highest good of the
all
collective.
of the
And I
all.
remember reading this section in during when I was looking up the Black Panthers for another episode, um about how womanism, and specifically in their movement, it was about how it wasn't that women need to be exactly that in their behavior and their functionality and their accessibility and all of that as men, but rather they are equal, but everybody embodies their own
Equal but
roles,
different.
equal but
Yeah, see,
different.
all this, I feel like all of this comes into play and needing definition and form and shape because of the system that we live within, which is 500 years of colonialism and Western European civilization
Mm-hmm.
that pervades most of the world now,
Mm-hmm.
or most of the, urban
Mm-hmm.
modern world, city, developed contexts from which we come. um, you need to have these categories and definition. Fundamentally, it gets down to this. uh, if feminism is that of, uh, you know one of the things of not being told how to be a woman by a man, right? Then equally, I don't want to be told how to be a woman by women. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I came into that recently. I just like an acquaintance asked me to sit for doing an ad kind of thing, whatever, a shoot, photography, whatever it may be. And then there was a one of my pictures were posted on International Women's Day, March 8th, with
Which is the most pandering day
yeah,
ever. It's
like,
the most
yeah,
irritating thing to
International
me.
Women's Day, International, I don't know, so many days there
Yeah.
are. I can't keep
Mother's
track.
Day.
I can't keep track of it anymore. Uh, Somebody said, I think you only had posted something or said something about like these are all invented by Hallmark,
Yeah.
likely. But so I came across in a feed a picture. My picture was posted with this saying like women have to be unforgiving or like some, I can't even remember what it said, for International Women's Day. I had not said that, but it was
Mm.
ascribed on a picture of mine
Mm-hmm.
as though it was me saying that. So I immediately messaged them saying like, who said this, meaning like I didn't say it, so who said it? And the answer I got back was nobody, but all women should. I was like, could you please take that picture down and please don't put quotes on pictures that of mine, which are not, which I haven't said,
Yeah.
being ascribed to me. Like it's, at least in India now,
Mm-hmm.
the way I see feminism, it's like a cult.
So that's another.
It's like a belonging thing. It's like you're either in the in group or you're in the out group. And if you don't agree with any one of the tenets, which seem to be variable to whatever they want to be at the given moment where it suits X, Y, or Z,
Yeah.
then you're in the out group. And for me, that's just like I've never been a group think kind of person, right? And I don't think most people are.
They
Most
aren't.
women are
Yeah.
not. I mean, again, okay, we are social beings. We like to belong, and maybe again, my evolution is from a very different perspective. But if feminism means towing a line, then what the heck have you freed yourself from? What have you freed yourself from
It's
if it
simply
means towing the
another.
line of another set? It's not those sets of tenets which kept you under the thumb of men allegedly, but now it's this set of tenets which keep you under the thumb of a certain group of women
Mm-hmm.
who are the in crowd, and therefore you got to toe that line or
Mm-hmm.
else you're out.
Yeah.
Please,
So
come on.
in the still in the framing of feminism, there was the third wave of feminism, which was in the 90s and all that, is what I feel like is happening here now,
Hmm.
which is that there's this strong idea of that you can be a right and a wrong kind of feminist and therefore woman, as opposed to this kind of, it's not truly defined because it's so splintered. And also with the onset of the internet and everything, the fourth wave of feminism, and I say that very loosely because there are so many different factions and splintered off sections of it now, where, but I think there is a, in most if not all, there is a shared idea of there not being a right kind of feminist, and they're finally coming to this settled point of basically what was true with indigenous societies of like you do you, and like we are all working towards each other's collective good, which is what I feel like is everybody's tried to come to, which is that, you know, if you're a trade wife feminist, which is, you know, this group of people who believe, you know, in going back to traditional ideals, and you know that women should, you know, be in the kitchen and raise children and all that, and that's what they believe and that's what they want and that's what they push for. And
And they're feminists.
that
So
they're
see
their own,
now,
but that's what I'm saying, they're their own version of feminists. And then, you know, there's the feminists who are still much more radical, and you know, like what is that punk, the punk movement, you know what I'm talking about, those girls, riot girls, like, you know, there's like that section of it, which is, you know, let's shave our hair, and like, you know, it's,
so
but I'm saying that
so
in
essentially,
that
where it's come down to
is that
now,
everybody does whatever they want.
yeah. So then, why do you need to put a tag of feminism on top of it?
Because there's a belief, and an agreed upon, I think, belief between even all the splintered factions, that everybody has gotten here and everybody can do what they want to do as women because of all these movements that have come
Great,
before.
more power to you. I'm gonna keep going. If you need a title or a tag or a category into which you need to place yourself in order to exist, great for you. You do you.
Mhm.
I'll do me, and we
Mhm.
all get along. I don't need a tag of feminism. I don't need to be affiliated with a group that calls itself anything, whether it's feminist or thisist or thatist or religiousist or what,
Mhm.
the isms and the ists and the belonging and the group think and the in group, like, miss me with that ish. Miss me with that ish. But something interesting that a certain type of feminism, let's say, and for me in India, at least in Bombay, for me this experience resonates very strongly because the ones crying out the loudest about the whole feminist uh, ethos or ideal or whatever their perception of feminism, etc., is, are the ones who it least affects.
Mhm.
It least is relevant to their lives because they are already free from being from the ruling class, from having a socioeconomic level that they're not in any way, shape, or form
Mhm.
compromised.
Mhm.
So the women, the masses, the majority within this civilizational system that's primarily European civilization, Western civilization, the majority that has rendered at a certain level, and the ones you would say then require something like feminism to be freed into that system, are the ones who have least access or understanding of that
Mhm.
you know
Mhm.
and if it's the ruling class that's dispensing this information, then where are we going with it? Because then it works like education. It's like education is indoctrinating you to toe certain lines so that you'll work within a system. You're creating cogs in the wheel versus free thinkers,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, the purpose of education, we all know, because it's not been updated in so many decades, is to create workers.
Yeah. So I saw a very interesting video. I wish I had it, or maybe we can insert it when you do
Mhm.
the edit or whatever.
Mhm.
It's a woman in Saudi, and she was speaking obviously of her own context there because they had this whole thing around, recently about women not being allowed to drive, and then everybody got
Ah.
allowed to drive and all that. And
Mhm.
I'm sitting here quietly driving as I have for the my entire whole life, and like, I'm sorry, but I have to say women are the worst drivers on the roads that I've experienced. I'm sorry, maybe a controversial thing to say.
Speaking as a woman driver, I agree. I am not
You're a
great.
crap driver.
I
Even
am.
though I taught you as the best as I could, making you
Yeah.
back up onto hills in a Jeep
Mhm.
and everything.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah. Anyways, no, yeah, and there are reasons for that also. There are reasons for that also. I see women, like up on their wheels and like
It's
Like, of
terrifying.
course, I get that.
And
I
the
get
times
that.
that I
But
have driven out and about on the
it's been
roads,
terrifying for me.
no, no, I
Out and
mean,
about on the road with you driving has been terrifying for me.
no, I mean like when I've been with my brother in the car and driving, and he always
He's
said,
been terrified.
yeah, but that's his problem. There've been, I knock on wood, I have never caused
Knock
anyone
on
any
wood.
harm.
Knock on wood.
But like there was an instance that he always refers to of me, really like being belligerent and pissing somebody off on the road, and that was his perspective of that incident. But I was like, no, I was being perfectly kosher and driving totally fine. It was just a bunch of guys loitering on the road and kind of like being all fronting on me just because they saw that I was a girl in the driver's seat. It
Yeah,
wasn't that
so
I was
there is
doing
all that
anything.
also. There is
Yeah,
all that also. But uh, basic rule of driving, A, the pedestrians always have right of way, no
sure.
matter
And I
what.
didn't do anything to them other
A,
than beep.
and B, you don't beep at pedestrians.
They were in the road.
Even if
They
they're
weren't
on
even
the middle of the
moving.
highway, the pedestrians have right of way. For obvious reasons,
Yeah.
you've always got to give right of
Yes, of
way. And
course.
B, you always drive defensively. Even if you're in a context where everybody knows the rules and follows the rules, you always have to drive defensively.
Yeah.
So those are like, anyways, in case you decide to regularly start driving. But going back to the story, the Saudi woman speaking about, that entire concept of feminism coming in whatever way it is in Saudi, in whatever form it may be. And I have lots to say about that, but like I'm not even going to get into it because we might get into really hot water controversial issues.
Didn't
Ah,
MIA's video for Bad Girls, wasn't it kind of touching on that? Because she had a
pretty
bunch of
much.
Saudi women
Yeah,
driving
yeah,
on the,
yeah.
yeah.
And skirting on the side wheel.
Yeah.
MIA is the tops. Like she says everything. She
Yeah.
says she's amazing. Anyways,
We love you,
about
MIA.
this, yeah, we do love you, Emma. Matangi, we love you and have loved you since ever before you were even born. So
How would it be before I was born? She's not that much older than me.
she was around before you were even born.
She was around before 1997. What are you talking about? She
Yeah.
came up in the 2000s.
Did she?
Yes.
Or maybe so when you were a baby.
We're
Paper
not.
planes? When was paper
Paper planes
planes?
was like, I don't
It was
have
in it
my.
was in Slumdog Millionaire. It was in
Yeah, Slumdog Millionaire was like
Pineapple
2006
Express.
or
Pineapple
7.
Express.
Was it in
That's
Pineapple
when it got big.
Express?
Was it? It was in
But even
Pineapple
Pineapple
Express.
Express was
Came
not
out
like
after you.
2000
Oh, so you
something.
must have been really small.
Okay,
Okay,
yeah.
all right. I'm allowed to kind of like merge
The
dates because it's been a
timelines.
while. Yeah.
Yeah.
Getting back to this
Yeah,
Saudi
sorry.
woman telling her story, she was in an interview talking about that whole concept of feminism. And she's like, the rah rah feminists running around in Saudi and how it's become like a thing. And um, she's like, they're very volatile about it, they're very vociferous about it, they're all out there, but it seems to be just for the women who can wear Fendi, Gucci, Prada under their abaya. Meanwhile, they have phalanxes of women coming in to work for them, Filipinas, Indian women, of the what in Saudi is the lower classes, for pennies on the dollar,
Hmm.
working as they do to send back money to their homes, and domestic staff. Um, no talk about feminism for them, right? Her specific thing was around these women, the claiming feminists not wanting to cook. Like, we won't cook for our families. Well, that's like a feminist tenet apparently.
Right.
And that being such a fundamental part of how you raise a family is like that act of cooking. Now, I've had my dad cook for me, you've had your dad cook for both of you guys have grown up with a dad who was the
Yeah.
main sustenance of your meals. I've
Yeah.
grown up with a dad who was, till he could, when he
Yeah.
wasn't at work, was the one who was cooking for us.
Mm-hmm.
My mom hated cooking
Mm-hmm.
and refused to do it, and
Mm-hmm.
was a real issue in our home
Mm-hmm.
about her cooking. She usually had staff doing it for her. She came from a background that had only staff doing it for her.
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a fundamental part of a family, that whole journey of the food and
Mm-hmm.
nourishment and how it comes into your body and what that makes of you and that whole lineage. So it's a big thing. And these women, the Saudis saying, we're not gonna cook. So her argument was like, you're not willing to do something like that because you're a feminist, but you have all these women in your kitchen doing it for you. Does the feminism not apply for them?
Was
Because
this?
they've left their families
Hmm.
at home, not cooking for them, cooking for you. So does that feminism not apply to them? I mean, there could be an argument to say, like, okay, they're monetizing that skill, which otherwise at home is
Is for
just.
free.
So there's arguments like, look,
Yeah, which
anything
is,
can be argued,
yeah.
anything can be accounted for and justified. My personal thing is, I can't affiliate with feminism as I've experienced it and known it and seen it now, regardless of saying that, oh, what you've had access to has been a result of
Mm.
the feminist fervor and that's why you've had the freedoms you've had. I would say not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe within the Western European civilizational
Yeah.
systems, but not within the indigenous systems. we
Mm-hmm.
we got on and got along,
Yeah.
even to the point of those systems primarily being matriarchal. To repeat myself again, indigenous systems were all primarily matriarchal. The way women are treated in India, the downtrodden, that whole, yes, we have a big problem with the way women are treated in India, no doubt, everybody knows that. But really, where does that come from? We say we worship devis and we have goddesses in our homes and in our temples, or however so that may be, and yet women outside, we know all the stories,
I
we've
mean, we
all
are
seen them,
way,
all
way
of that.
high up on the
So
lack of women's safety
so
index in the
so
world.
where does that
Yeah.
come from? Where do we get all the taboos around sexuality and the expression of human emotion
When
and
we are the people who created the Kama
the Kama
Sutra.
Sutra,
Yeah.
right? It's 500 years of colonialism.
Yeah.
All of these
Yeah.
systems require then categories and justifications and accounting
Yeah.
in order to exist, because the whole system is so unnatural.
Yeah.
So then you need, in order to seeing what it does to women, you need to then create this other thing,
To
which is
counter it.
feminism, in
Yeah.
order to make a place and have the rights for women, etc.
Yeah.
If you left everybody alone, I mean, we
What
were
comes
we
up
were
for
hunting,
me,
fishing, doing whatever we needed to,
what
quite
comes up
riding horses very well in the desert in Arabia, as far as the Saudi women
in
are concerned.
Arabia.
I mean, Saudi Arabia,
Oh yeah.
Saudi.
In what comes up for me, I guess, because we are in the modern world, we are now beyond, we are in the midst of these 500 years of
Which is
colonization.
dismantling all around us. It's
Absolutely.
collapsing because it can't be
Of
maintained the way
course.
it's European colonial civilization that's been spread around the world, with everything that comes under that umbrella of feminism, thisism, thatism, whateverism. It can't be maintained. It's so far out and unnatural uh,
The ways of being, the
from
actual ways
nature.
of
It's
being.
so
Yeah.
unnatural that it can't. It needs such course correction. It constantly needs course correction, just like capitalism. Every 100 years, capitalism collapses and goes bankrupt, and you have what happened in 2008. And then it
Mm.
all has to be rejigged.
Yeah.
The Fed has to feed the banks and prop them up again.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, most of the 90% of people collapse under
Yeah.
it. Housing market crashes. Just and capitalism comes under that umbrella of colonialism,
Yeah.
right? So we've had 500 years of colonial what we call civilization is actually colonialism
But speaking
around the
from
world.
the reality of being in it, as it is collapsing, it is in the process of that, but we are in it. So I think, speaking from that perspective, what comes up for me, the one thing that I get hooked on and stuck on a little bit in regards to feminism and being a woman and existing in the world that I exist in, is this question of obligation, which I think is what it kind of gets distilled down to, is that what I feel, like my identification with this ism, is that it's trying to push away this idea that as a woman you're obligated to do XYZ, because there's some sort of belief that men can kind of operate in whatever ways they wish to, and there isn't a specific obligation. Whereas with the woman, like you said, in a family, like this thing of, you mentioned your mom not want liking and enjoying to cook because she had been raised in a particular way and everything, but there was some sort of like her having a family and going down that traditional path. Had she perhaps been a young woman today, or in a different context, or with some sort of awareness, maybe she could have felt like, oh, I'm not obligated to do this, I can do something else, I don't necessarily have to have a family, I don't necessarily have to go down this path, which will then result in me needing to cook a meal. Because in that sense, like, yeah, you are obligated to feed your children, like if you had children, they're your responsibility.
And that's
But
not a male or female thing.
no,
If you've got a family who, you just do it.
absolutely.
In
But my thing is that I think that men have been historically, in this colonial section of history, been more empowered to, for example, just say, "Oh, I don't want to have a family. I'm not going to do that." Whereas a lot of women, that
I
not
don't think that's true. I
no.
think men were equally pressured to get married and have children, at
Mm.
least in our context,
Mm-hmm.
because then it goes back to marriage being a financial association,
Yeah.
in those at those levels. So,
Yeah.
and I don't think that's true. I think men have been equally obligated. Like, men
Mm.
are expected to be the caretakers. Men
Right.
are expected to be the providers. Men are expected to be, these roles that we traditionally consider men to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So there's obligation all
Of
around.
course.
Yeah.
And my dad was an exception, an absolute exception, for a single Orthodox Punjabi ex-naval officer to be raising two kids alone.
Mm-hmm.
Complete exception to the rule.
Yeah.
And yet, he did it. He did
Yeah.
what he did. It was like an amazing upbringing. I look back now at this age, and God bless him wherever he is. At this age, at this point, I can look back on all of it and just be like,
Excuse me.
and just be like, wow. I look at what's around me
Mm-hmm.
and how it's gone down in my own personal experience in marriage, raising a son on my own, then all of what I've seen around me of men, friends, associates, friends, husbands, partners, etc. And my dad was quite something to have done what he did in his time, in
Mm-hmm.
his age, alone as a single male, going to work and raising my brother and me. It
Yeah.
was like, wow.
Yeah.
While we traipsed around the world.
And I think you see it in, like, obviously in you, but I think you also see it in your brother, right? In the way that he lives his life and how he is and who
Yes,
he is as a man,
yes,
being quite an exception to the modern men
yes,
around us all.
yes. Yeah, they don't make men like my dad and my brother anymore. They don't make men like that anymore.
But I feel
Yeah,
like at the natural end of this conversation, what I've gotten from this is that anytime you're questioning something and you feel like something's a problem and you're trying to figure out what the reason is, it's colonialism.
pretty
The
much.
answer is always
The answer gets
colonialism.
down to pretty much that. You got a system imposed on you. We were raised in those systems. We were educated in those systems. We've all emerged with this complete disconnection from our natural selves. And
Yeah.
that's why we then need to account for, justify, build up these, processes and movements and things that, like, then give you a space within that system.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, miss me with that ish, you know and
I
anytime, I would like to add to that, to say that anytime, given whenever this comes out, anytime that you're questioning or thinking about or wondering what's going on and need answers to it, maybe just tune into this podcast
oh.
where we talk about real stuff,
Mm-hmm.
real talk.
Real talk.
Yeah,
Girl talk.
girl talk.
Girl talk. I Oh, this is only 34 minutes.